Welcome to another edition of Florida Sportsman Action Spotter Podcast. I'm Captain Rick Riles. Hey, we're going to have a good time tonight, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to start things off with a quick trip out to Paradise. We're going to stop in at Nosara, Costa Rica, check in with Craig Sutton, find out how his reopening's coming, and when they'll be back to just absolutely tremendous billfish fishing, sailfish, black marlin, blue marlin, you name it, they've got it. Dorado by the tons. Craig is ready to get back to it. Then we're coming to Florida, and we're going to start up in the northeast corner and talk with our buddy Captain David Voorhees, work our way all the way around the state and out the Panhandle and find out what's going on. I tell you what, this mullet run, I saw pictures of it today down near Stewart. It is in full bloom, and it's still going on up in the northeast quadrant. So it apparently is going to be quite a year for mullet. I'm very glad to see it. It's one of the great success stories of Florida's fisheries management, and now's the time to take advantage of it. Hey, even if you don't have a rod and reel, drive down to the beach and watch the goings on. The fireworks are going on all up and down the surf, all kinds of predators. It's just fun to watch. Our Action Spotter podcast this week is brought to you by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth. By Nosara, Paradise Fishing, your dream vacation. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flat span offshore boats, you need to check out youngboats.com. We're going to park our plane right here next to the office of Nosara Paradise Rentals, walk in and join our buddy Craig Sutton. Craig, how are you?
I'm good, Captain Ricky. Real good, buddy. We're back opened up.
Good deal. Good deal. You got boats fishing again?
I'll be fishing Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Hopefully I have some good reports.
I know that'll feel good. Man, do I know that'll feel good. Golly.
You have no idea, Ricky. It was like, I mean, in the last 3 weeks, it's gotten better, better, and better. And this week, we're on pace to do a really strong week this week. So
good.
Just keep my fingers crossed.
Have you heard any fishing reports from down there at all?
Heard some big Dorado being caught and a few big yellowfin, but I hadn't seen the pictures. I know David caught big Cobia around the 50, 45-pound mark, which is that's a big fish.
Craig, let me ask you a question. If you were in charge of Costa Rica fisheries, and oh, by the way, I think Costa Rica does a better job managing their fisheries than the United States does.
I couldn't agree more.
If you were in charge of your area, what your boats fish for, what one regulation would you change?
Well, we did about a year ago. We started releasing all our Cobias. And that was something we did internally, which it was a group decision. But we saw a fall off of the real big Cobias. We said, you know what? That's one fish that we've done a lot of trips on them, and we've caught a lot of them for people, and people like them, but we just don't need to be eating them. And so we started letting them go, and we have not had one person complain about it or cry about having to release that fish. They realized it's such a slow-growing fish. I think it was a good move. And now I understand that a lot of guys in Costa are talking about it, and some guys in Panama are talking about releasing it too. So I think that's going to be a good thing.
Closing Cobia snapper to harvest would be your one thing, right?
Yep.
You know, it's gratifying to me to hear you say that so many of your charters are going along with it, Craig, because I've said for 10 years now, it's not the rules that will save our fishery. It's the attitude of the fishermen that will save our fishery.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, you know, you said it before, and I totally agree that the best conservation is for lifelong fishermen.
Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah. If you're a lifer like you and I are, you've seen the good years, you've seen the bad years, and you understand how the good years got good, and what we did to the fishery as kids was tragic. We just didn't know any better.
We didn't, and you know, everybody was doing it back then. And it was like, you know, I hate to say it, Ricky, back in the 60s, we threw our trash overboard.
Oh, sure we did. Oh, Craig.
Yeah, we threw it overboard.
Yeah. I'll even fess up. I'll tell you that I've emptied reels overboard before to change line.
Oh, wow. Yeah, well, we all did. We just didn't know.
We just didn't know. Yeah, I'm so glad we're raising our grandkids and our kids to a much higher standard. I'm thankful for that. Can we call you next Monday over there?
You better believe it. Yeah. Just, you know, I'll be coming off the boat about that time. You want to make me the last call of the the program, that's fine.
I'll do that. I'll make you last, and we'll be ready for a great report. I can't wait to hear it.
All right, brother.
Thank you, buddy. Well, let's get started around the state of Florida. We're going to start up in my hometown, up in the northeast corner, with Captain David Voorhees. David, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing fine, Captain Ricky. Doing fine, buddy.
Good. How about mullet up there? Is the mullet run still going?
Sort of been a strange week this past week between the moon phases. You know, things were getting hot and heavy. Water temperatures were getting down into the mid to low 70s. And then, boom, all of a sudden, we got a warming trend. Water temperatures back up into high 70s, 78, 79 degrees now. It looks like it put the brakes on the mullet run for a bit. You know, the weak moon phase, the in between the full and the new moon, it doesn't pull as hard up here. You know, one thing about Northeast Florida, if you've never fished up here, I'm telling you, and I'm got to constantly repeat this, the tide is everything up here, Rick. We live and die by the tide. Up here, you see quite a swing when it comes to tides. This past week, a lot of reports of guys saying, just slow. The flats never emptied out. Creeks never got low enough to push the reds out of them. The reds were able to stay back in the creeks. The water sort of warmed back up. So it was a little slow week this past week, but still a lot of variety. It won't surprise me if we catch 9 to 10 different species. We're catching everything from the jacks, the ladyfish, trout, red flounder. But, you know, we're seeing other species like sheephead, some croakers, still plenty of mangrove snappers everywhere. So it's not uncommon to get quite a variety. This week I targeted my deep water spots for the reds, thinking that, well, you know, if the flats don't empty, maybe these fish won't be in the deeper water. But I did find some, not the numbers I would like to see, but you know, I'm waiting for this next moon phase, Rick, which is going to be my favorite. We're coming up on the new moon. We actually got some tide that's going to be as high as 6 feet this week. Got some fly fishermen coming in. We're going to go do the flooded grass. I'm real excited. I was sort of worried that the water might get too cold, but that's not going to be the case. It warmed up nice. The crabs should be crawling all over the Spartina grass. Rick, I want to tell our listeners, if you've never been to Northeast Florida, go out and fish the marsh and look at the Spartina grass. It's just beautiful to me. And this time of year where we get what's called the spring tides, very extremely high tides, we look for the reds tailored up in the Spartina grass. Now, I like to get out of the boat and walk onto the Spartina grass. If you're not familiar with that, I don't recommend you doing it for the first time. Either get a guide. A lot of guys like to pole over them. Some of these skinny water skiffs they've got now, you know, they only need a few inches of water to pole, and they can get up on top of those flats. My big old flats boat is not going to let me do that. So I prefer to get out. I walk. I spot my fish, and I love using the fly rod this time of year. I prefer it over the conventional tackle, and the reason being is all the false casts I can make to that redfish before I decide to lay that fly down is key, because where you pitch your fly is so important when you're fishing the Spartina grass. These fish are very spooky. Anything, you line them, you hit them with your jig, you hit them with your fly, they're going to bolt off that flat so fast it'll make your head swim. So you got to be accurate with your cast. You got to be stealthy. You got to sneak up there. It's a lot like hunting, Rick, and I think that's why I love it so much.
Dave, I do too, and it is my favorite inshore fishery between that and finding them with their backs out of the water, and it's the same thing. You're hunting them, essentially, is what you're doing. I think if I had to give a piece of advice to people that are asking about walking in that grass, my experience has always been, David, if the grass is short, the bottom is hard. If the grass is real tall, the bottom is usually soft because it's got a deeper root system. Do you find that to be true?
Absolutely. That is the key. You got to look for the short grass. And what you do is you look out over these Spartina flats, and you almost look for the stuff that looks like somebody's been out there with a lawnmower and mowed it down shorter than all the other grass. And now another key thing I like to look for when I'm scouting for these spots is I want to go to a spot and see lots of crabs, lots of fiddler crabs. That's one of the things I like to see. And another thing I look for, too, when I'm up on these grass is what I call seagulls dancing. And that's when these seagulls sort of just skim along the surface of the water, bobbing up and down, looking all over. Well, guess what? They're looking for those fiddler crabs, too, because what eventually happens is fiddler crabs do not like water. They are land crabs. So they will climb up the stalks of grass and actually try to get out of the water. And the seagulls, especially if there's a redfish down there trying to get to them. So the seagulls know that. I look for those seagulls dancing on the top of the water. That's usually a telltale sign that that's a good flat that's holding some crabs. Other things I like to look for is what I call the fingers. And the fingers are little tributaries that go onto these flats. And when you're out there looking, those are the first areas you want to look for, is those fingers that come out of the deep water and spill onto the flat. That's how these reds are going to enter these flats. Now, not just reds up there. There's also sheephead and black drum. And that is the ultimate grand slam. I've only done it once, Ricky. Very difficult to do. But to get all three species on a fly rod in the same day, the black drum, the sheepshead, and the red drum.
That's impressive, David. I've seen several hundred sheepshead on the flats, I'm sure, over the years. I've never caught one.
They're hard.
They're real hard. There's no doubt. They're real hard. I've gotten tight on a couple, but that's been it. For the most part, they grab that fly and spit it so fast you never have a chance.
What are you hearing from the offshore guys? You hearing anything offshore? I mean, the weather wasn't too bad this week.
Yeah, thanks for asking. It really wasn't. And the bottom fishing in particular, David, has been very good. The big mutton snapper biting, and there's been some grouper out around the ledge. Limits of beeliners has been very easy, but the surprise has been the cobia. Boats fishing on the party grounds have been catching 1 to 2 legal cobia a day. And that's good to see. Those fish obviously headed back south from their summer homes. And that's a fishery that we don't utilize much. You don't see too many people cobia fishing this time of year, but guys need to not miss it because they pass through in a hurry and they're off our coast right now.
That sounds great, Ricky.
Yeah, David, let me ask you one quick one before we go here. David Voorhees is in charge of the northeast section of Florida for fisheries management, but he only gets to change one law. What do you want to change?
Oh, that's a good question, Rick. You know, last year, if you would ask me that question, I probably would have said, well, I want to go back to 1 redfish per person. Mm-hmm. But you know what? After thinking about it, I want to say any trout over 20 inches must be released.
Like it.
Any trout over 20 inches must be released.
Like it. The redfish should have taught us that protecting the brood stock means you're always going to have redfish. Why don't we do the same thing with trout?
I don't know why, Rick, but that's the one thing I would change. Go, let them spawn. We'll get back to the way trout fishing used to be in Florida.
I like your idea. Thank you, David.
All right, Rick, tight lines,
Take
everybody.
Care, my brother. Now let's hop in the car, drive down 95 a little bit, and pull over for a cup of coffee with our buddy Jim Ross. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Rick.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Tell me about fishing the East Central. You guys got any mullet this week?
We do have some mullet. What's interesting, though, is the bigger mullet pods that generally have the tarpon and sharks on them. Mm-hmm. There's been one right there at Canaveral the last 2 days, and there's nothing in it. It's this giant pod of milling mullet and no fish in it, which is really, really odd, you know, just based on what we typically know about the mullet run. You know, the ladyfish and the Spanish and the jacks like to chase the fingerlings around, but, you know, those bigger tarpon and sharks really like those bigger mullet. And for some reason, for 2 days now, they just haven't paid them any mind whatsoever. However, the guys that are using finger mullet are catching a lot of fish. So there's mangrove snapper. There's some big bull redfish running around in the Canaveral Bight around the buoy line there. Snook at the jetty, snook up the beach, jacks, Spanish, bluefish. My son was out yesterday, did really well. Also talked with Captain Troy Perez yesterday, and he said that actually as the day went on, the bigger redfish, the bite got better and better for those big bulls. Just kind of using a slide and sinker rig like you would for flounder or, you know, anything else, but actually fishing around the buoys. The bases of the buoys. There was just a bunch of big redfish in that whole Canaveral Ships Channel and Bight area. They weren't up top blowing up like you've seen in some of the videos in years past, so YouTube videos and things where guys would get on them, and we call it School X when they do that, and they get up top and they would eat everything, including your hat if it fell overboard. But they're down on the bottom and they're eating really well. Troy said he had like 27 of them yesterday, up to 46 inches. So that's a pretty darn good day on Big Bull Red.
That's a real good day. And that's an interesting point. And I've used buoys so often to catch bait, but there's a big old weight down there that's like a big old wreck, or like a big old I don't want to say a big artificial reef. You know what I'm saying, though. It's something on the bottom, and it's that cable all the way down there, and that's invariably going to hold fish, isn't it?
Yeah, and that seems to be the case. You know, we typically get triple-tailed around the buoys. Mm-hmm. We get flounder around those buoys, but you know, at certain times of the year we get black drum and we get the redfish like we have right now. So even though they're not really up top, which is the most fun way to try and find and catch them, because when they're up top and you can throw top waters and suspending plugs and swim baits and things like that on them, that's always a lot of fun. But just, you know, on the bottom, slide and sinker rig on the bottom. Very, very simple rig, but very effective rig right now.
Yeah. Anything from offshore, or is it still pretty well shut down?
Still pretty dirty. You know, a dolphin here, a sailfish there. A grouper here, an amberjack there. Probably amberjack fishing is probably the most consistent thing. That the city service tanker wreck and some of the other wrecks in that 200 to 250 foot depth, just inside of the stream, are pretty consistent with the amberjack right now. But as far as top species, we haven't seen a whole lot of those. You know, up in the trolling part of the water column.
Gotcha.
So the guys that are going to the other side are still doing pretty good on the yellowfin, though. So that's a hike, as you know. It's you're talking about 70, 75, 80 miles at the closest that you're going to find them, and then some of those guys are running to the 120 buoy. But the yellowfin are there, a few blackfin and skipjacks, and true bonita. Actually, there was some true bonita caught this past week over there as well. Not the little tunny that we call bonita, but actually true Atlantic bonita.
Let me ask you a question. Have you ever eaten a true Atlantic bonita?
No, I've never even seen one in person, to be honest with you.
Ooh. I caught a couple out of Stewart last year. They are good. Oh, I mean.
They go good with some side dishes, huh?
Forget the side dishes. They are a cross between wahoo.
You don't even need them, huh?
They're a cross between a wahoo and a blackfin, and it's got just the right amount of flavor to it. Oh, brother, it's good. I'm telling you.
Huh. If I ever get the opportunity, I'll make sure that I put a knife on one.
If you get the opportunity, bleed him out, put him in the box, and say, I'll take this old trash fish, guys. Don't worry about it. I'll plant it in my azaleas or something.
Yeah.
Then go home and put it on the grill. Jimmy, as always, we appreciate it so much.
Take care, Rick.
Thank you, brother. Talk to you next week. Now we're going to go to one of my favorite cities anywhere, Stuart, Florida. I do love fishing out of Stuart. So does Captain John Earhart, and he's with us tonight. John, how are you?
I'm good. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you, son. Tell me about fishing out of Stuart.
I happened to fish offshore yesterday. I got to tell you, it was absolutely beautiful out there. It was Lake Atlantic, what I like to call it, black calm, and it was pretty good fishing. We started off bottom fishing, and we fished in between the 6 and the 8 mile reef, straight out front of the St. Lucie Inlet. We caught several mutton snappers, a few small cobia, triggerfish, some actually really large triggerfish, and we're just using cut bait on the bottom. And after about an hour of doing that, we decided we wanted to go troll for a little bit, and right around the 6-8 mile reef, and we caught 2 out of 5 mahis, and they were about 6 to 10 pounds. I did hear reports of other guys catching as many as 9 or 10 mahi in that 75 to 90 feet of water. And it's pretty much just right on that color change where the water goes from dirty brown to like a nice light blue. And it seems like most of the mahi are kind of traveling down that line right now.
Oh, that's really good. Did anybody go off a lot deeper than that?
I did hear guys on the radio that were fishing out in 180 to about 250 feet of water. But because it was a west wind yesterday, they were pretty much just complaining. I heard of a few blackfin tunas being caught and an occasional mahi here and there. But most of the mahi action was in close, unfortunately. There wasn't much weed line outside of 75 feet of water, which there wasn't hardly any weed line in 75 feet of water to speak of anyway. So if you're trolling or live baiting for mahi, I'd definitely stay in closer this week.
Gotcha. All right, what's going on inshore?
Inshore mullet run still going strong. Got a lot of mullet along the beaches, up inside the river, around the bridges at night. A lot of big snook being caught, some nice tarpon up to about 90, 100 pounds. Most of them are about 15 to 40 pounds right now, but if you're fishing the channel edges, I would expect some 90 to 100 pounders using the larger mullet, like a 6 to 12-inch mullet if you want to catch bigger tarpon right now.
Are you fishing those mullet on the bottom, or are you freelining them?
Well, typically I'm anchored up, freelining these mullet about 75 yards behind the boat, and we're just sitting there stationary, and that mullet's just kind of swimming in one spot in the current, and we're just waiting for a tarpon to kind of pass through along the deeper channel edge and see that mullet up on the surface. And I got to tell you, man, watching a 90-pound tarpon strike a 12-inch mullet,
Ooh.
Nothing beats it.
Ooh, I believe that. Ooh.
Yeah, and if you're fishing for these bigger tarpon, you definitely use larger tackle. I'm typically running 80-pound braid with a 100-pound leader, and I'm using a double strong 9 to 12-0 circle hook because, I want to catch these fish in a reasonable amount of time and safely release them so that they don't die.
That's an excellent point. I like that a lot. Well, it sounds like things are going pretty well down there. That's good. I hope that mahi run lasts long enough for me to get down there and take advantage of it. Let's hope so. Now, is it common to have them this time of year?
Yeah, usually October and November is very good for mahi. November I kind of expect them out in the deeper water, but sometimes during the mullet run in the month of October, you can get those mahi in close, feeding on the finger mullet and the larger mullet right on that dirty water line, which is probably what's going on right now. So I think we got another week, 2 weeks of catching those mahi in close. So if you have the time to get out there, I'd definitely take advantage of it.
Good deal. Thank you, Captain John. As always, we appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you, Rick. Talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week. Now, we're going to shift all the way down south a little bit and check in with the mayor of Miami himself, Alan Sherman. Alan, how are you?
Rick, I'm doing fine. Just beautiful down here. Quite a bit of rain yesterday afternoon, late afternoon, but other than that, it's just been beautiful. And I think the forecast for the rest of the week, right into the weekend, is going to be just as nice. So definitely looking forward to some good fishing out there.
Are you seeing any bait, if any mullet made it down that far yet?
So there has been some mullet here. We've gotten some schools of the big mullet, and we've had some schools of finger mullet. Now, I was on the water this week 5 days out of 6. And in those 5 days, I saw small groups of finger mullet, not any real big groups. And that's from the ocean side on into inland. There's schools of mullet around, but not like what I would like to see. Last week, we talked about you had to be there if you wanted to get in on it. So not being on the water every day of the week, it's possible that some of these giant schools of mullet have passed by already.
I don't think so, Alan, because, the surf off of Stewart, you'd have to see to believe how many mullet are there. And we have got a pretty major cold front coming this weekend. So I will be willing to bet you by this time next week, we'll be talking serious schools of mullet.
I look forward to seeing them, but we are seeing a lot of bait fish. So we have giant schools of pilchards in the area. And then if you go further offshore, there's big schools of ballyhoo. Not a lot going nuts on them yet. I expect to see them as soon as that water temperature starts to drop. But there is some good fishing going on. Yesterday, I fished my family, and we mostly stayed offshore. Had 2 blacked out wells of pilchards, and we did some bottom fishing. We caught just a mess of mutton snappers, like over 20.
Wow.
I can't tell you how many we lost, but not one of them was of legal size. We had a number of them get eaten by sharks. We had some others, break us off. We had lesser amberjacks. We had small amberjacks. We had big blue runners. We had 3 decent 2-pound mangrove snappers. So there was action from start to finish, and it was flat calm, and it was really hot. Then the rains came, and we headed on in. The trips before that, Saturday, Friday, and Thursday, I mostly stayed inshore. And during those charters, we had some snook to 26 inches, and they were biting really good. And then we had quite a few mutton snappers, some yellow jacks, mangrove snappers, and some big jack crevalles, some 8-9-pound jack crevalles. So that fishing has been pretty stable. And hopefully it'll stay that way until the mullet schools get in here and throw us some different species like the mackerel, the bluefish, the kingfish. I'm looking forward to that. What's going on other than that? The guys looking for dolphin have had to find floating debris to do any good. And the blue water was close. It went offshore, and there's not much weeds associated with the color change. Mm-hmm. So you had to look for something substantial. The guys that did found decent-sized dolphin on them, big triple tail, a ton of Almaco jacks, way too many that they brought back in, because they're not big fish. They're like 1-pounders, 2-pounders.
Right.
But there's no size limits, I guess, on these fish, or quantity limits, so that it's legal to bring them in, and they're edible. So they're not going to waste. But I'd like to see them stay in the water and have a chance to grow bigger. They also had some baby wahoo that was hanging out underneath this floating debris. So if you're looking for dolphin in the days to come, that's what you need to look for.
Meant to ask you, and I think I've told you this, but we now have a segment called Ask Shelby. What you can do if you want to ask Shelby a question about any area of the state is just write to Shelby, SHELBY, at floridasportsman.com. But there was a question for you this week, and the question that Margaret asked was, what time of the year do you like best for nearshore muttons?
Oh, definitely now.
Now.
For sure.
Okay. All right.
It's been going on now for a while. Maybe 3 weeks ago, might even be 4, you mentioned that you had never seen so many mutton snappers being caught in the middle of the state, if I'm right.
Right. That's correct.
Those fish seem to have arrived in our area. I mean, this is October. October is one of my most favorite months of the year to fish, because it's in the midst of all the migration. Years in the past when I worked on the party boats, I'm going to throw a number at you, and you're going to go, what? When I was on the party boats, not just my boat, but the other boats that were out there, our top night, that's a 4-hour trip. Now, there were no limits on mutton snappers back then. 454, if my memory serves me right.
Oh, my word.
In a 4-hour trip.
Oh, my word.
And we left the spot and fished somewhere else because we couldn't keep them off the hooks. So, and that happened this month. Now, that was 20, maybe 30 years ago. But this happens this time of the year. We haven't had a big weather system that might create this huge run of the muttons, but we had 20, and I can't tell you how many we could have caught if we had kept at it. It's just we weren't getting legal fish. It was every drop we got a fish. Every pilchard got hit on the bottom. So, we've been catching muttons in shallow water in the bay for weeks, maybe even a month.
Cap, as always, we appreciate it so much. Please tell me we can talk with you next week.
Looking forward to it.
Good. And Margaret, now is the time to go catch mutton snapper with Captain Alan Sherman. Alan and all of our action spotters are brought to you each and every week by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth. By Nosara, Paradise Fishing, your dream vacation. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flat spay and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com.
You know what Yamaha Outboards love? The genuine formula and consistency of Yamalu marine engine oils. What? Outboards are subjected to punishing conditions like high loads, salt, and humidity, a mix that automotive oils can't handle. Yamalu full synthetic and marine performance formulas are certified to protect against friction and corrosion for reliable performance every time. Find Yamalu marine oils at your nearest Yamaha Outboard dealer. Locate them at yamahaaoutboards.com/dealers. Yamaha, reliability starts here.
Hey, Raj, being consistent is a mark of a quality product. If you've been Florida's #1 chum for over 10 years, there's got to be a reason.
For 10 years, Tournament Master Chum has lived up to its name. That's why more tournament pros insist on Tournament Master than any other chum. It's the only chum with Menhaden milk mixed right in. That means it gets the scent out faster and deeper than any other brand of chum. It comes in a grind size for every species from kingfish to catching bait. Your fishing time is way too precious to you second-rate chum. Bring the action to you by insisting on Tournament Master Chum. It's worth every penny.
When you're ready for the finest in custom-made flat spay or inshore-offshore hybrids, you are ready to meet the Young family in Inglis, Florida. For over 21 years, the Young family has built custom boats one at a time for every type of fishing. Nothing can sneak up on a flat quite like the Gulf Shore flats boats, and I've never fished a better hybrid than the Young 24s and 27s. Rob Young is a naval architect who takes tremendous pride in each and every build for each and every customer that wants their boat custom built exactly the way they want it. Is it time for you to move up? Are you ready to own the finest boat built? Then you need to visit the Young Boat facility in Inglis, Florida, or check them out online at youngboats.com. Okay, well, our buddy Nick Stanczyk can't be with us this week because he's offshore fishing. Imagine that. So we're going to skip on around to 10,000 Islands and say hello to Captain Steve Dahl. Steve, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Rick. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Tell me what's going on in 10,000 Islands.
Well, so the other day, I happened to be reading something about Old Faithful, right? The guys are up in Yellowstone.
Right.
They were saying that it's probably going to end up drying up. And, I started thinking about that and telling some of the guys down at the dock this. And one of my friends is a captain says, well, we're right in the middle of Old Faithful right now down here, and it's never going to dry up. And we were all kind of laughing. And, if you really think about it, one of the everyone's always looking for that, go-to type of pattern. And I've always spoke and not fishing a memory, if you will, and fish the moment. And the one exception to that in our area is when the calendar says October, we're catching redfish. And it doesn't really matter because it's really odd this year. The weather's saying it's a dry September, but the calendar's October. But this week in particular, I want everybody to focus on a couple of things. We have an amazing incoming tide this week, which is going to make the balance of the week amazing for fishing. And it's highly driven by the new moon. And the new moon, which is the dark moon, is, in my opinion, the best moon you can fish from an inshore side. And you couple that with migratory fish coming into the area, this weekend is going to be special because it's been special for the first 2 weeks of October, and they're absolutely chewing, Rick. I mean, it is probably the best redfish bite I've seen in a few years. So we're doing pretty simple fall pattern stuff. We're focusing really on like hard bottom points and shoals on what I call the outside southernmost islands. So if you look at our region, kind of line up all the outside points and shoals, get on Google Earth and kind of see those white areas. They'll easily come into play and just kind of make a milk run of those. And, with a dead low first light tide that we got kind of the next 3-4 days, I'd focus staying way out from those, areas, fish efficiently. Some search baits like soft plastic paddle tails, walk the dog topwaters are working right now. You'll probably get that bite for the first 2 hours of the day. As the second part of that tide starts to settle into the area and get high, just push yourself further and further into those points. And I've gotten in a habit in probably the last week of just running them again, taking my 4 or 5 best points, fishing them on a low incoming. And then once they start to get high, I get close to those points. And that's when I kind of break out the live bait. And pilchards and shrimp certainly will catch them all. Don't get me wrong. You'll get some bonus snook in there as well. But if you're 100% focused on this redfish bite, I would absolutely have some ladyfish chunks available. And ladyfish are all over the place right now, busting glass minnows. You'll see them on your way to your spots. Throw some jigs at them, and you should be able to get some fresh ones. But that is really what we've got going on. It's Red October, and we are focused on it.
I don't think anybody can appreciate the great red fishing we have like a lifer, like you and I can. Because we were around when it wasn't good. We know what it's like to look for redfish and not find them. And doesn't it make the fishing we have over the last couple of years a lot of fun?
We're blessed. I think we all too often get this utopia bubble we live here in the sportsman's paradise as far as I'm concerned. And, we get a little spoiled. As fishermen, we're always trying to figure out going to the other side of the lake or the other side of the bay. And, there's fish right around you all the time. And we're so darn spoiled. And I try not to take that for granted, but the hunter in all of us wants to go find them somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And we've got them right here in our backyard. But you're right. It's come a long way. The fishery has absolutely come a long way in the last 25 years. It's unbelievable.
It sure has. Have you heard anything from offshore?
The nearshore bite's strong. Going back to those glass minnows, we have just hordes and hordes of those. That's the first wave of our fall bait run. Threadfin herring are starting to come in, but they're not in those big, tight pods just yet. But when we get the pods of glass minnows, you're certainly going to have your Jackson ladyfish in the mix, but Spanish mackerel are moving in. And I'm telling you, it's tons of fish in that 18 to 25 inch range, literally almost every cast if you can get on the right schools and stay with them. They're knifing through these baits, coming out of the water. We've taken fish up to 30 inches this past week. So if you've got some novice fishermen, people that have the ability to make some lengthy casts, and it's fun for kids because speed is the trigger, so they get the reel as fast as they absolutely can and still get hooked up. That's a great bite, especially if you're into action and doing that. That makes for a great day, especially if you have novices or kids on board. So my only recommendation is I like to go with like a 40-pound fluorocarbon leader. Would rather beef up my leader like that. Notoriously spooky, even when they're feeding in the frenzy like that. So a lot of people make the mistake of putting on steel leaders, avoid the bite off, but you're just absolutely not going to get bit. You're going to get tons of follows, but. So definitely go with the fluorocarbon. You can chance it at 30, but you're going to be retying a lot. So the snapper bite's still good, Rick. And boy, there's some footballs out there. I mean, it's definitely football season with the mangrove snappers, and we're getting some really big lanes. I mean, really big ones, like mid-teens, which is kind of unusual for us. We usually don't get them that big. So snapper bites in full effect, right now too. So it's great. I mean, it's my favorite month of the year is October.
I tell you what, I've always wanted 2 Octobers and 2 Mays, no Februarys and no August. How about that? Can we do that?
We have the same desire for that.
That would be okay.
That's exactly it.
All right, buddy. That sounds outstanding. I appreciate the heck out of the report, and we will look forward to talking to you next week.
Sounds good, Rick.
Thank you, Steve. Take care. Let's pull on around into the Southwest section and check in with our buddy from Snook Stamp Charters, Captain Greg Stamper. Snooky, how are you?
Been excellent all week, Rick.
Tell me what's going on at your house.
Obviously, you're going to probably hear this same report from everybody on the entire West Coast all the way up to at least probably even the Big Bend possibly, is the redfish bite just continues to be in fuego. Multiple day numbers are not a problem at all. If you're not getting 5 or 6 fish, then you're probably out there when that water is just stagnant. Other than that, there's fish everywhere. And we've had a lot of really cool things in the back bays this week. So even this morning, I was creeping up in an area where I like to get my whitebait when it's windy and the beaches are a little bit murked up. And I saw flashes, and I said to myself, there they are. I threw it, and I probably caught 100 ballyhoo in my net.
Ooh.
And I put them in my cooler. I froze them. I'm going to use them for cut bait over the next few weeks because, what else am I going to do? If those bills get caught in my net, I don't want to just kill them and let them go. So I got them. I got my whitebait a little bit later and some pinfish, et cetera, et cetera. But what's been showing up throughout the bay entire week, not even talking about redfish, has been really cool, Rick. The pompano are here. We can catch those no problem now. They are very targetable. We're catching permit again in our back bays. And I truly believe, Rick, these fish grew up when we didn't have snook from our freeze, and now they're coming back and they're big enough to survive and they're running around. We're talking about permit that are only 3-4 pounds, but that's a perfect size permit for somebody who's out there messing around trout fishing with a plopping cork and a shrimp.
Yeah, it sure is. I tell you what, that's fantastic. Incidentally, what you could do with those ballyhoo is brine them overnight, and then you could put them in your food saver 4 to a pack, and then you could ship them to your Uncle Ricky. You could do that.
Well, I did brine them, and I did put them in bags, and I will use them for several months moving forward.
Good. It's so funny you mentioned cut bait because we had a listener question for your area this week when somebody wanted to know in the Southwest section, when you're fishing cut bait, what's your favorite cut bait?
So I have a few, but honestly, the cut ladyfish is probably my number one.
I think I could have answered that for him because it's certainly the answer I use at my house.
Yeah. Pinfish is really good. Mullet's very good. When I take a pinfish, like a larger one, I may cut it in half. Crabs are very good. I cut those in half at times when I have big black drum around, which, by the way, we did see this week. They're here as well. But ladyfish, to me, is probably number one. But the one key I'll tell him is make sure it's fresh. Don't just freeze them and then pull them back out. They get soft. A fresh, nice ring of ladyfish stays on that hook And even if the fish misses it, I'm like, don't reel it in. It's still there. We're fine.
Yep, I've experienced the same thing, and you're right. Don't fillet them and don't freeze them. Cut them into rings, and that's as fine a bottom bait for almost everything I can think of, Greg. But isn't it strange that you're seeing so many pompano and black drum with the water temperature as high as it is?
So we got a small front. It didn't drop the water temperature for a niche. I mean, all it did was lower our humidity. We lost maybe a degree or two in a couple places, but nothing that's going to be dramatic. The black drum, I think that up north, it cooled off, and these fish have been pushing south. I only ran across them for the last 2 weeks purely on accident because I wasn't even looking for them yet. And I just saw big muds when I was running, and I said, man, I know what that is. I turned around, and sure enough, they were there. They're not real keen on the shrimp right now. So I got to go out one of these nights, catch me a bunch of crabs, and next time I see them, we can blow them up.
Gotcha. Boy, that sounds like a great report, Craig.
Until we get a massive cold front, I don't see nothing changing.
That's fantastic. Craig, great report. Thank you so much. We look forward to talking with you next week.
All right, tight lines, Rick.
Take care, brother. Now, let's pull up 75 a little bit. I think we'll stop around West Central and talk with my buddy Ray Markham. Ray, how are you?
Yeah, Rick, I'm doing just fine.
Good deal. Glad to hear it. Tell me what's going on fish-wise in your area.
Well, the inshore guys are just tearing up the redfish again. We got a new moon coming up this Friday, which is kind of making for some pretty decent tides and good moving water, so the fish are chewing.
Good.
We're seeing a little bit better action on trout here in the last week or so. Always moving water helps that out. The guys are still catching plenty of snook, and everybody seems to be pretty happy. Inside Tampa Bay, they still got a plethora of mangrove snapper firing off. Guys are doing real well with that. Plus, we've also seen an influx of legal-sized bags inside Tampa Bay. I mean, we usually have a contingency of them anyway, but they, for whatever reason, saw considerably more this week. So water temperature is down around 80 degrees, 82 in some areas of the bay, but it's a definite drop over the last week or so, and I think that probably has a little bit to do with it. There's plenty of bait around. You get on nearshore waters and offshore, and there's lots and lots of schools of bait as well as Spanish mackerel just chewing the fire out of them. Got a few reports of guys doing a few kingfish on some of the deeper wrecks. They haven't really shown up yet in any kind of numbers to talk about, but I know the Old Salt King of the Beach is scheduled for I think the weekend of the 7th or something like that of November. By now, they should be kicking coming down back there from the Panhandle, so we should be seeing a potload of them coming pretty quick. Probably on that next cold front, it'll start moving them.
Good deal. Ray, let me ask you a question. You mentioned your gay grouper biting. Do you get in on any of that grouper trolling over there? Do a lot of guys do it?
Yes, they do. Here's the trick to that, and it's the same thing with bottom fishing, particularly inside Tampa Bay. There's a few guys that are really, really good at it, and they pretty much target these fish around the slack tides. The tide rips pretty good inside of Tampa Bay as it exits the bay, and when that happens, these fish start, kind of hugging the rocks. They get real close to structure, and they don't pull away from it. But when that tide slacks off, they start moving out to feed. So it's the same thing with mangrove snapper. We have a good mangrove snapper fishery inside of Tampa Bay, but it's the same deal where if that water's moving a lot, it's number one, it's really difficult to get the bait straight down so you can feel the bite better. And because a lot of guys, they'll have to start using more and more weight, and sometimes they're 2, 4, maybe even 6 ounces of weight just to kind of keep things straight up and down. But if you start losing the sensitivity and the touch, and the snapper can fight and take whatever you got in the end of your hook in a matter of a split second, well, you got to be really quick at it. It makes it tough when you got a lot of weight on the line. Guys that are really doing it and successfully doing it, they're fishing it with 10-pound test, 10-pound test braided line, and 20 to 25-pound test leader. They get broken off a lot, but they get a heck of a lot of bite.
Gotcha. Well, like everybody, it seems like this is just starting out to be an incredible season for redfish. They've all up and down the East Coast, all the way around through the Southwest, everywhere. And I'm awfully glad to see it. For lifers like you and me, It's fun to see the fish come back the way they used to be, isn't it?
I wouldn't exactly say they're like they used to be, but, it's an encouraging look. I heard something that was a little discouraging the other night. Instead of the 1,000 new residents in Florida a day, we now have 1,100 a day moving to Florida.
Yeah,
so the
I know it.
Has changed a little. We have to be a lot more vigilant about what we're doing with the fishery and make sure that, we keep it a sustainable one so that we can have fishing for a long, long time to come.
Ray, you've been watching the news just like I have. Would you live in New York?
No.
Okay. We can't blame him for wanting to come here. We came here too. Thank you, Cap. We appreciate it.
All right, buddy. We'll catch you later.
Talk to you next week, Raymond. Now, we're going up a tree. We're going to climb up into a stand, and we're going to disrupt one William Tony in the middle of his hunt. William, how are you?
Doing good up here like a big hoot owl.
Hey, William, you want to hear me whistle? I can whistle real loud.
Unless you got a deer whistle that you can bring them in, then go ahead.
No, I don't have that. I wish I did. I'd use it myself. Give me a quick fishing report. I don't want to interrupt your hunt.
Well, we had a little bit of a slow start here the end of the weekend and yesterday, but, I attribute it. We had a big high pressure setting over Florida, which helped us not have the hurricane. So a little bit of that and big tide right now with this big new moon coming here this week. So the fish are a little bit scattered, being that we got these big tides. I recommend for the redfish, go deeper into the backcountry, and for your trout, make sure to hit it just as the tide turns, or wait till that mid part, the outgoing when that water's dropping that are on the bite.
Gotcha. Okay. William, I tend to think there's an awfully good redfish bite headed your way because it's been all over the state. So if it cools down a little bit, I think you'll be in them. I'm going to let you get off the phone and go back to your hunt. And after that sausage gets made, just don't forget my address, okay?
It's just a 400-pound boar hog sausage.
No, I don't want that. No, that's not what I'm talking about. Thank you, William. Good luck on your hunt, son.
All right, bud.
All right. Kevin Lanier just became a grandfather just within the last few hours. So we want to send our congratulations to him. He will not be with us this evening, but it is for the best of reasons. Kevin is about to enter the best period of his life. Hey, if you're not a grandparent, trust me, it's better than anything you've experienced up until now. I hope we all get to be grandparents. Well, we can't leave Florida without going out the Panhandle. We sure wouldn't want to miss an opportunity to pull over and talk with Captain Tyler Massey for a few minutes. Tyler, how are you?
I'm doing good, Rick.
Tell me what's going on with your fishing.
Fishing's still been really good. Inshore fishing, the redfish bite, the slot size redfish, 18 to 27 inches. It's been one of the best bites that I've seen in a while. It's just been real consistent. You go and catch 10 to 12 keepers, just nice fighting fish a trip. Typically, the bite's been around the pass. So we have some jetties, some deeper rocks and that kind of stuff. And it's just been pretty much automatic over there. Fishing live bait, live shrimp, or live pinfish, small finger mullet, that kind of stuff. So that's been a really good stop for an inshore bite.
Good deal. Boy, I tell you, every single podcaster that I've talked to tonight has started out exactly the way you did, bragging about their redfish bite. It looks to me like it's going to be the best fall we've seen in a while. And if you're as old as I am, you can remember the falls where there weren't any redfish. This is really special this year.
Yeah, it's been good. We've got a good fishery over here for the slot size redfish, and in the next couple of weeks we're going to be starting to catch in the big bull reds too. We get a good run of them in the fall, starting in late October, and those are a lot of fun to chase around. We catch them on the bridges, just fishing on the bottom, and then we also get a chance to sight fish them on top.
Oh,
it's
cool!
Up chasing pokey balls and stuff, and it could be an acre of them on top of the water in the bay, and it's just eating anything that hits the water, and it's really a lot of fun to do that.
That's way cool. Have you heard anything from offshore? Has anybody been able to get out?
Yeah, so we got our a couple snapper days extended for the weekend. So starting this weekend through the 1st of November, I believe, the next maybe 3 weekends, I think we're going to get red snapper days. So fall is a great time to catch red snappers, and a lot of the guys are going to be targeting them, when they get out on the weekend. So that's something to look forward to, and it should be pretty easy fishing for everybody.
That's fantastic. That is really special to get those extra days thrown in. We were not so fortunate on the East Coast, but I would have liked to have been, that's for sure. That's a great report, and we appreciate the heck out of it. Please tell me we can talk with you next week.
I'll be here, Rick. We'll see you.
All right, buddy. We'll check in with you 1 week from tonight. Hey, that wraps up our trip around the state tonight. And let me tell you something. Everybody was bragging on redfish. The mullet run is still strong from Jacksonville all the way down through Stewart. Hasn't made Miami in force yet, but it hadn't changed the redfish. The redfish have been good from Jacksonville all the way down to Miami, over to the southwest, up through Ray Markham's west central area, and on out through the Panhandle. That's because we have a great management plan in place. In my opinion, is a plan that we should mimic with some other species that are not as fortunate numbers-wise. But hopefully the weather's going to hold off. Now, it looks like on the long-range forecast, we may have a little bit of a rough weekend, but we should get back into a calmer pattern again next week. I certainly hope so. I've certainly enjoyed tonight. So glad you listened. If you've got a question for any of our action spotters, if you want to ask Tyler Massey when the best time to ambush those surface schools of bull reds are, ask Shelby. Send your question to Shelby at floridasportsman.com. Tell her what the question is, the area of the state you've got a question about, and we will ask it on the air. And as always, all our action spotters are brought to you each and every week by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth. By Nosara, Paradise Fishing. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flat spay and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. Until next week, I'm Captain Rick Riles, and we will see you on the rip.